Hello and welcome to lesson number 2. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about sort of the different parts of the sewing machine, the things you need to know before you get started. Sort of if this is the first time you've ever seen a sewing machine and you're unboxing it, what are all the pieces? What do you need to know? So let's go ahead and dive in and we'll talk about all the different features of the sewing machine. So when you are unboxing your machine, these are the items that you will find in the box as you're removing it. You should have an owner's manual. You should have a foot pedal with a cord, the sewing machine. You'll have extra bobbins, lots of different feet, sewing machine feet, a seam guide, a power cord, and then you should have some tools to help you clean your machine. So those are the basic items that you will find, and we'll talk about each one of these things more in depth as we move through the sewing course. But these are the basic things you'll find. So be sure and keep all of these items that come with your sewing machine. Make sure that you put them to the side and label them in a bag. So you can find them easily later when we're going through other lessons, like how to clean your machine, how to take care of your machine. You'll be able to find all of these items that you need. So here I have the sewing machine as it's been unboxed. So when you take it out, you can see that there's some spool holders. This is where you put the thread for the machine. You should have a foot pedal that comes with your machine, and mine has this coil that you can unwind. So I'm going to unwind it. And then in the machine on the side here, there should be a place to plug it in right there. Okay. And then you have, this is like an extra tension stitch regulator. This button here on my machine moves the feed dogs up and down. So none of these buttons are super important yet. So let's talk about plugging in your foot pedal. There's usually a plug for that. The hand wheel is very important. This will raise and lower your needle. That's also super important. You also should have a power outlet. So there should be a place to plug that in to the machine, and then there's an on-off switch. So I'll go ahead and turn the machine on. So now the machine is on. Okay, so my foot pedal's connected. And let me show you, move these cords. The hand wheel, when I turn it, the needle goes up and down. Okay, so these are sort of the basic sewing machine parts. I have an entire printout. You can read about each one in there. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about getting familiar with your machine before we dive into the next lesson. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the top of the sewing machine. So all of the sewing parts of the machine that are located on the top. The first thing, a lot of machines have a carrying handle. So this is used to carry the machine around easily. A lot of machines also have a horizontal spool thread as well as a vertical spool thread. Usually you can use either one depending on how the thread is on the spool, and we'll talk about thread a little bit later, but this is where you put the spool of thread. The other key features that are up here on my machine and are on all machines is the bobbin tension here, the bobbin winding devices. All of these will be used for your winding a bobbin, and we'll talk about that in the next lesson, how to do that exactly. The other parts that you can actually see from the top, this is part of the thread guide that you will use to thread the machine. All of these are thread guides. The other thing that I have up here, and a lot of machines will have it right here, is the thread tension. So this will squeeze the plates that makes the thread tighter as it goes to the machine, or loosen it. So that is all up here. There might be a few other buttons, like I have this eyelet here, and this eyelet on my machine is used, if I have my machine threaded, I can take and use this vertical spool thread, run it through the eyelet to wind the bobbin so I don't have to unthread my machine. So that's a really nice feature. Again, this is just a little specialty feature. You may or may not have some of these buttons, but you will have the thread guides and everything that's used to wind the bobbin, and very likely you'll have a thread tension adjustment here. Okay, so now we've talked about the right side of the machine, the top of the machine, and now let's talk about the parts of the sewing machine that are located on the front, and there's quite a few. Let's start right here. Usually you'll have a knob or buttons to select which stitch you're going to stitch on the machine. So number one is usually your straight stitch. That's very true for every machine. So you'll either enter the stitch or you'll turn the knob to select it. Also, on my machine and all the other machines, there'll either be knobs or buttons to lengthen the length and width of the machine, of the stitch. This button here will allow you to move the needle left or right depending on where you want to start. Or if you're using like a zipper foot and you want to move the needle so it doesn't hit the presser foot. This button on my machine is a speed control. It'll allow you to sew faster or slower, and it's really good, especially when you're starting out, to go ahead and push that as slow as possible so that you can really control how fast you're sewing. We also have a backstitch button, which is very important. It's on every sewing machine. I have seen sometimes it's a lever over here that you push down and you push the pedal and it'll backstitch. Mine, you depress this button. A lot of people will have a button here. It always has this little reverse arrow, upside down arrow with a loop. If it's a button or if it's a lever, they'll both have this symbol located on it. I have a needle threader on my machine. A lot of them do have needle threaders. We have the thread guides that are used to thread the machine, which we'll talk about later. There's a needle clamp right here. This holds the needle in place. You'll either unscrew it or use a screwdriver to release the needle, and we'll talk about that in another lesson. You have the presser foot here. Here you have the stitch plate. A lot of times the bobbin will sit in here and you'll have a slide plate where you can access the bobbin. I have a bobbin case. This is a little bit different, but a lot of sewing machines will have a drop bobbin on top, and you'll have a little slide plate that you can remove to put the bobbin in. So those are all the basic parts of the sewing machine on the front. You'll also notice there's guides and markings for quick reference for measurements. You also have a seam allowance on a lot of the base plate. They'll be in metric as well as empirical measurements. So once you have set up your machine, you've plugged it in, you've turned it on, and now you're ready to sort of understand the different functions and how to thread it and how to wind the bobbin. The next thing you need to do is find your manual. Your owner's manual is an invaluable resource of information. I suggest before you move any further through the course, before we wind the bobbin, before we thread the machine, is that you go through the parts of your sewing machine and have sort of a basic understanding of where they're located and what they do. So if I tell you to hit the reverse button, you know where that is. If I talk about the spool thread, you know what that means. And then also there's safety tips in there. There's so much information in your owner's manual that you should definitely check out before we move forward. If you have any questions about your specific machine or you're confused about one of the buttons you may have, send me a photo with the make and model and the question, and I'll be happy to answer anything you have. So this is a really quick, just, this is sort of how you set up the machine, very basic. There's more in-depth information in the PDF, and then read your owner's manual. But again, if you are stuck or if you need any additional help before you move forward, please let me know. Send me an email. I'll be happy to help. All right, let's keep moving forward.